Hi guys. Today we're going to talk about the causes of urban decline. So, one of the things that causes urban decline, which we talked about last time we met, is political decisions. So, sometimes you have governments that favor some cities over others. That can be on the state level, but really at the local level, um, sometimes you get issues where the government makes poor choices. And we saw that in our Scranton example where the city ran out of money to fund services. And when your city runs out of money, that makes it very difficult to actually function as a city. Also, there's something called out migration, which is really people leaving the city. And that's when wealthier and more skilled people move away, leaving a lesser qualified population. So then what you have is people who are better off economically get out and leaving the people who are unable to leave behind. Those are typically people who are less educated, they're poor, and because of that, then they can't work, they can't find jobs. You have a higher unemployment rate, and then people also continue to leave. There was a term for this that was called white flight, which is where you have people, a lot of white middle class, gradually leaving cities for the suburbs because really, I mean, perceived racism. Like they viewed African Americans who migrated towards cities and they chose to leave. Um, Decline in quality housing. So we have old pre-war buildings get worse because of poor maintenance. Owners who are unwilling to spend money on maintenance, tenants who can't afford it, slumlords. Essentially, they can collect money for because they own, or even though it's a crappy apartment, they can still collect rent on it. And they've decided that they'd rather just collect rent on a crappy apartment than spend money and make it look nice. Um, and housing can also decline in quality if population densities become too high. So if there's too many people in an area, that also serves as a less motivation for the people to repair these houses because they know they can get paid for it. And then a lack of urban planning. So narrow streets um, can cause congestion, bad traffic issues, and then that forces people, that makes businesses not want to invest there. And then as businesses stop investing there, they stop going. There's no businesses for the people to enjoy. Um, and then you're going to have the city like it loses services, so people will be less likely to go there. And then a loss of industry. So in the US, we had many heavy manufacturing industries in Chicago and Detroit. And then it becomes known as the Rust Belt, though, as globalization occurs and outsourcing, which is where companies send um, jobs to Asian countries because they can pay them less money. It decimates those industries. So Detroit, which used to make car parts, and still does, but lost entire neighborhoods because these high paying manufacturing jobs left. And Detroit was extra hurt because a lot of these manufacturing jobs people didn't need education for. So you had really a culture that didn't really value education because it didn't need to. And then once these manufacturing jobs went away, you just had people who could afford to leave, and then those who couldn't stayed and suffered in poverty. And then that leads to a concentration of low income groups. So you have these residents all together, and then you have higher levels of poverty that occur, which results in higher drug use, increased levels of crime. And then as that happens, the place begins to decline more and more. Property values go down as crime levels go up. And then that leads to people not repairing them and then eventual abandonment. So we have excuse me, this graph, and you can sort of follow along with the cycle. Um, there's some sort of industrial decline that occurs, and then that flows into industries and businesses begin to reduce their workforce. When that happens, you have these buildings sit empty, um, and then you have wasteland that happens, and you have an increase in burglary, burglary and vandalism, and then that leads to a population decline. You can have residential properties. Um, After people become unemployed, out-migration occurs, residential properties lose value, or once people become unemployed, they have less money to spend. Some people turn to crime, local shops get less customers, and that leads to them closing. Or people have to spend on making these properties nice. We have decline that way. People become depressed, lower wages, they make less money, lower aspirations. There's weaker school achievement. The workforce becomes less skilled, and less people want to invest. It's a vicious cycle that can really people can get into. So after you finish this, there's a video on the agenda about Braddock, Pennsylvania, which is a small town that really was going through some significant struggles. And you're going to watch the video on Braddock, and then we're going to look at have you look at some things that you might want done if you were in this city. And we're going to finish part 3 of this unit on Monday.